This is a story that has been in the making for some 7,000 years, when the First Nations peoples began to live in what is now British Columbia. It's a story about a place with a history as rich as its soil. With a vast agricultural land base and distinct urban enclaves, the Township of Langley has long had to contend with questions of how to create thriving communities. With modern-day demands, it is important to make sure that Langley is ready for the future. It is time to harmonize community needs with the preservation of agricultural land. How can we build better interactions between where we live and where we farm? How can we reduce conflict and plan for the township's future? To address these questions, we propose a plan. In many ways, the history of settlement in the area is a history of our quest for food. When the First Nations people settled here thousands of years ago, they hunted, fished, and practiced traditional forms of resource management that paved the way for modern agriculture. Early European explorations and the fur trade resulted in the establishment of the first Hudson's Bay Company fort in 1827 and the HBC farm near Milner in the early 1830s. The 20-acre farm was gradually expanded to 2,000 acres, and when the gold rush ended in the 1870s, some of the prospectors took up residence in the Fraser Valley and began farming. The township began to take form as the communities of Langley Prairie, Murrayville, and Aldergrove attracted more homesteaders. On April 26, 1873, the Township of Langley was one of the first rural districts to incorporate as a municipal government. The 20th century was a challenging time as communities had to come to terms with the advent of automobile and suburbanization. Langley was no exception. The opening of the Trans-Canada Highway and Portman Bridge in the early 1960s made Langley a bedroom community. Commuting to Vancouver and Burnaby was a short 30-minute drive. Between 1971 and 1976, population growth was more than 13% per year. One of the defining points in our history was the establishment of the Agricultural Land Reserve in 1973, years before the township had prepared its first official community plan. With no OCP in place to inform the basis of ALR boundaries, the township came to be made up of a patchwork of ALR and urban lands. This poses significant challenges to community development and efficient service delivery to this day. The first OCP for the township was eventually adopted in 1979, setting a framework for urban growth while preserving agricultural lands. Most of the township was designated as agricultural and rural residential to conform with the ALR. In 1993, Township Council adopted the Rural Plan. The plan declared that rural lands are intended for agricultural use rather than holding zones for future urban development, and among other things, added some 2,100 acres of farmland to the Salmon River uplands. The Agricultural Land Commission said it was the most positive local government policy document with respect to agriculture. One of the goals of a 2013 agricultural viability strategy is to increase agricultural productivity and to make the township one of the most productive municipalities in the province. Aldergrove was the first community to receive planning attention. It developed in a relatively compact fashion around a walkable downtown core. The Aldergrove Revitalization Committee was formed in response to planning reviews that found that there was an insufficient land base to accommodate the community's needs. The township prepared a comprehensive ALR exclusion application for approximately 480 acres of land around Aldergrove. This was intended to address servicing challenges, provide much-needed affordable housing, and establish long-term effective boundaries for future developments while avoiding speculation. With strong public support, the application was presented to the ALC in 1996, but it was rejected on the basis of what was referred to as its high-quality agricultural lands, ALR boundaries that predate the OCP, and the issues not being unique. In 1997, the Minister of Agriculture used the Local Government Act to limit Council from exercising its zoning powers within the ALR without the Minister's approval. Subsequently, in 2001, based on a need for collaboration and recognition of the township's unique history and character, an agreement was reached with the Agricultural Land Commission, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Township of Langley to work together to improve governance, bring farming bylaws up to provincial standards, repeal restrictive regulations for greenhouses and swine operations, and to improve edge planning standards along an enhanced and permanent ALR. Good fences make good neighbors. It's important for appropriate buffers between the areas where we live and the areas we farm. The location of livestock areas or pesticide application is a concern for local residents. Trespassing, garbage, and nuisance claims are of concern for farmers. And so the main benefits of good edge planning are increased land use, lifestyle certainty, better neighborly relations, shared responsibility between urban and rural residents, and encouraging the widest range of agricultural uses in the ALR. The proposed edge treatments will consist of a 300-meter buffer between urban and agricultural uses. They will also protect environmentally sensitive areas. Council reinforced this concept through the adoption of an arbor ribbon study in 2005, connecting a number of natural and planned arboreta nodes. The arbor ribbon was envisioned to provide a buffer between urban and agricultural areas, while also providing aesthetic improvements and recreational opportunities for the township citizens. But even with good edge planning, less is more. Fewer edges mean fewer opportunities for conflict. The key long-term vision is to reduce the length of the ALR boundaries by up to 75 kilometers, while increasing the overall ALR area by an estimated 200 acres. Discussions with the Ministry of Agriculture are focused on bringing farming regulations in line with provincial standards, and have resulted in a request to consolidate all existing rural zones into one agricultural zone. This will reinforce the notion that lands within the ALR are primarily intended for agricultural use. It's worthwhile to note that in a 10-year period from 2002 to 2012, about 77 acres of land were approved for exclusion from the ALR, compared to 2,633 acres for the rest of the Metro Vancouver region. This amount represents less than 3% of the regional total, when the Township of Langley accounts for about 10% of the region's overall land area. There is also a need to improve connectivity, specifically to the border crossing at Aldergrove, the Langley Regional Airport, and the Township's University District. This will help ensure the continued success of these key economic development drivers. An effective transportation system, including a convenient road network, is a major component of a servicing strategy, and so there is a need to improve access at strategic locations along the Trans-Canada Highway, such as 216th and 232nd Streets. But this doesn't mean we need more roads, only more efficient ones. After a 10-year review of surplus road allowances, only 1/3 of unopened roads were determined to be needed for future road purposes, leaving potential to add agricultural land from over 70 unused roadways. It's been said that the Township of Langley is home to the most parcelized farmland in Metro Vancouver, with nearly 3/4 of its agricultural lots under 4 hectares. Nearly half of the ALR lands in the township is lying idle. With the growing consumer demand for locally produced food, There is both great urgency and great potential to increase agricultural production in the township. Considering the township's population is expected to double in the next 30 years or so, we must be careful to balance the needs of our productive lands with the responsibility that we have to our citizens. We must enable our neighborhoods to grow into thriving, complete communities that are in harmony with their rural neighbors. Looking back at the rich history of First Nations, fur traders, gold prospectors, and homesteaders, the quest for food has always been a central theme in the township's community development. The ALR lands in Langley must continue to serve as the key to securing land base for local food production for generations to come. The solutions presented here have been years in the making, the end result of meticulous engagement with the township citizens and all levels of government. To strengthen farming, we must create better boundaries, better connections, better edges, and better zoning. We must balance the needs of urban and rural life by building communities in harmony with the agricultural land reserve.